The girl on the roadside. The rain was falling lightly over the Pacific Coast Highway. Cars zipped by with speed and carelessness, their tires hissing against the wet asphalt. But on the shoulder of the road, just near the bend where cell service always dropped, an old silver sedan sat crooked, its hazard lights blinking like weak beacons in the fog. Inside, a young woman gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Her lips trembled, and tears pressed at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. Not here. Not now. Her name was Lena, 25 years old, new to Los Angeles, nervous, unsure, and alone. She had moved from a small town in Kansas just 3 months ago, chasing something she wasn't even sure had a name. A chance. A beginning. And now, with a flat tire, a dead phone, and no one to call, her hope was rapidly deflating, just like her tire. She got out of the car, her jacket doing little to stop the cold. Cars honked as they passed, some slowing just enough to gawk, but not enough to help. Her shoes sank slightly into the wet dirt on the side of the road. She stared at the tire. She didn't even know how to remove the hubcap, let alone fix the thing. Shame crept up her neck like a fire, and she crossed her arms to stop herself from shaking. Then she heard a sound. Not the roar of a passing car. Something slower, gentler. It was a motorcycle, a black one, sleek and quiet, pulling over behind. Her car. The rider wore a helmet, and for a second Lena's heart raced. Not from hope, but fear. She took a small step back. The rider turned off the engine, swung one leg over the seat, and removed the helmet. The man's hair was damp from the mist, but his face was calm, gentle, kind. "Hey," he said softly, "looks like you've got a flat." Lena stared at him. She recognized him. Everyone did, but her brain didn't want to believe it. You're Keanu Reeves." He smiled but shrugged. "Just someone with a spare 10 minutes and a wrench." Lena opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't know what to say. She watched as he crouched near the tire, examined it, then walked back to his motorcycle. He pulled a small toolkit from one of the side compartments. "You have tools on your bike?" she asked, still in disbelief. Keanu glanced back with a warm chuckle. "You'd be surprised how often I end up helping strangers. Flat tires, overheated engines, stuck in mud. I guess I just like being ready." He got to work, his movements calm and practiced. He didn't talk much, but his silence didn't feel cold. It felt peaceful, like he wasn't doing this for show, but because it was simply who he was. "I don't even know how to thank you," Lena said. Finally, her voice cracked a little. "You don't have to," he said without looking up. "Maybe someday you'll help someone else who needs it. That's enough." There was a moment of quiet, only the sound of the rain and the occasional car passing. Lena felt something shift inside her. The weight on her shoulders didn't vanish, but it lightened. Someone had seen her, helped her, without wanting anything in return. When the tire was finally changed, he stood, wiped his hands on a cloth, and gave her a nod. "You're good to go." Lena looked at him. "You're seriously just leaving now?" "I've got to be on set soon," he said with a grin. "But if you ever find yourself in trouble again, maybe carry a spare donut tire and keep your phone charged." She laughed. It came out small and a bit broken, but it was real. "Thank you, Keanu. Really." He nodded once, slipped his helmet back on, and got on his motorcycle. As he pulled away, Lena stood there, unsure if she'd dreamed the entire thing. The mist swallowed his figure until he was gone. But the story didn't end there, because what Keanu didn't know was that Lena wasn't just a nervous girl with bad luck. She was someone with a past even she tried to forget. A past full of wealth, inheritance, and power. A girl who had walked away from money so big it could have built cities. And she had her reasons, but fate wasn't done with her yet, and neither was he, because their paths were going to cross again, not on a highway, not in the rain, but in a moment so unexpected, it would shake both their lives. And what Lena would reveal next time they met would make Keanu question everything. The silent storm inside her days had passed since the moment on the highway, but the memory refused to fade. Lena found herself waking in the middle of the night, heart pounding, her mind replaying the soft sound of rain and the calm voice of a stranger who had fixed more than her tire that day. There was something about Keanu's presence that lingered. His humility, his quiet strength. But most of all, the way he never looked at her with pity, just simple human kindness. It shook something loose in her chest, something she had spent years hiding under layers of fear, distrust, and inherited guilt. She sat alone in her modest apartment, staring at the empty wall where a painting might hang if she ever had the courage to make this place feel like home, but she wasn't ready yet. She hadn't been ready since she arrived in Los Angeles, running from a past that weighed too much for someone her size. But maybe it was time to unpack a piece of it. She turned toward the locked drawer in her bedside table. It had been sealed since the day she left New York, since she disappeared from that world. Inside was a letter, never opened, never read. It had arrived 3 weeks after her father died. The lawyer who sent it had included his name, the name she had stopped using. Lena Blackstone. Blackstone. The name meant wealth in circles she didn't belong to anymore. Hotels in London, tech campuses in California, oil in Texas, and more money than one person should ever have. It also meant power games, cold dinners, and nights spent crying in silence while the world outside her mansion windows believed she had it all. Lena had grown up behind glass, her every move calculated, every smile trained. Her father had been many things: powerful, brilliant, ruthless. But he had never been gentle. And when she turned 21 and refused to sign the papers to join the family trust, he cut her off. But the thing she feared most wasn't being poor, it was becoming him. So she vanished. She changed her last name, sold the car she was gifted on her birthday, gave up the penthouse and took a bus to California. She worked small jobs, waited tables, cleaned hotel rooms, and slowly began to understand who she was beneath the weight of the Blackstone legacy. And then came the letter. The lawyer had tracked her down somehow, probably a trace from her social security number when she got hired at the diner downtown. But Lena never opened it. She didn't want to know what was inside. Not until now, with trembling hands, she pulled open the drawer and unfolded the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on thick, creamy paper. Her father's signature inked at the bottom. And a second letter, sealed, with a golden stamp. It was from a woman, someone named Elena Romanova. The name meant nothing to Lena, but the address attached to it, it was international. Monaco. She frowned. The letter from the lawyer explained the basics. Before her father died, he had transferred a sum of money to a private offshore account, over $90 million. But it wasn't meant for business. It was personal. He left it in her name, not as a power play, but as a final confession. A rare moment of something close to regret. In the last paragraph, the lawyer wrote something that struck deep. He said if you ever find someone worth building a better legacy for, use the money. But not for yourself. He said, you were always the light he couldn't reach. Lena read those words again and again. They didn't heal the wounds, but they cracked the armor she had worn for so long. She folded the letter slowly, pressing her hand over it like one might close a door they weren't yet ready to walk through. The money didn't tempt her, but the idea of building something, maybe that did. That night, Lena didn't sleep. She stayed up sketching ideas on scraps of paper, places for women who had nowhere to go, shelters for teens kicked out of their homes, art centers for kids with no support. She didn't know how to do any of it, but she knew the feeling of having nothing and still needing to survive. She knew the pain of pretending to be okay in a world that only valued masks. And somehow, in the back of her mind, she kept seeing that moment on the highway. Keanu's hands tightening bolts, his voice calm, his spirit steady. He didn't know, but he had sparked something inside her. Maybe it was time to meet him again, but not by chance. Lena had learned a few things from her family: how to find people, how to move through the world quietly when needed. She didn't want to intrude, but she needed to say thank you, this time for more than a tire. The next morning, she called a friend who worked at a small local production company. She used a different name, a borrowed connection, and a careful question. Within hours, she had a list of shoots happening in the area where Keanu was last seen. Most were closed sets, private, off-limits to the public, but one had an open access point. They were filming scenes for a documentary downtown, near an old railway station. She went, heart pounding the whole way. And when she saw him again, standing near a camera rig, sipping tea from a thermos and laughing quietly with a crew member, something inside her shook. She almost turned back. She almost let the fear take over. But then he looked up. Their eyes met, and he smiled, like he remembered, like none of it had been nothing. "Hey," he said, stepping forward. "Silver sedan girl," she laughed, and it broke something open in her chest. "Flat tire guy." He looked at her with that same gentle curiosity. "Everything okay?" She nodded. "Better than okay. But I need to tell you something." He raised an eyebrow, patient, calm, open. But before she could speak, a man stepped between them, sharply dressed, cold eyes. Lena knew the type immediately. "Miss Blackstone," he said firmly. "We need to talk now." Keanu looked from her to the man, then back again. His expression changed, concern tightening the corners of his eyes. She froze. The name had slipped, and everything she had kept buried was now standing out in the open. The name she never wanted back for a long moment, the sound of the city faded. The noise of the crew talking, the distant rumble of passing cars, even the clatter of a dropped metal pole. None of it seemed real. Lena's breath caught in her chest. The name echoed louder than anything around her. Blackstone. She hadn't heard anyone call her that in over a year, not even in her own thoughts. And now, standing in front of Keanu Reeves, the one person she didn't want to lie to, it came out like a slap from the past. Keanu looked between them, his brow furrowed, not with judgment, but with curiosity, like a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. The sharply dressed man, standing tall and stiff like a statue in a business suit, didn't flinch. His voice was sharp and cold when he spoke again. "Miss Blackstone, my name is Dominic Ward. I work for the family's private affairs. We've been trying to reach you for quite some time. Your disappearance created more than confusion. It created risk, and now with the news of your location spreading in certain circles, we need to talk. Privately." Lena didn't move. Her feet felt like they were buried in cement. The words felt like chains pulling her back toward a world she had fought to escape. She hadn't run just because of grief. She had run because the money, the power, and the influence came with a poison she couldn't stomach. And now that poison had found her. Keanu didn't say anything, but he didn't walk away either. Instead, he stood a little closer to her, his presence like a shield, not aggressive, just steady. Dominic took a step forward. "You are the last legal heir to the Blackstone legacy. The family has made arrangements based on your absence, but certain interests in Europe are now being challenged. Your name is showing up in legal documents and private accounts. Someone's digging, and if you don't protect yourself, others will take what's left." "I don't care about any of that," Lena said finally, her voice hoarse, but rising with quiet strength. "I left that life for a reason. I don't want the legacy. I don't want the money." Dominic's lips tightened. "You may not want it, but it wants you. You've been named in matters that go beyond the trust. Your father—" "Don't talk to me about him," she snapped, surprising even herself. Keanu's eyes never left her face. He wasn't prying, just listening, absorbing, understanding. Dominic's posture softened, only slightly. "Miss Blackstone, Lena, there's a woman, Elena Romanova. The letter your father left you, she's not just anyone. She's your half-sister. She was hidden from public records for her safety. Now she's trying to reach you." Lena blinked, her thoughts crashing like waves. The name in the letter. She hadn't made the connection. She had a sister. Her father never once mentioned it. But then again, He had buried so many truths under silence and power. "We believe she's in danger," Dominic continued. "There are people trying to use her as leverage. Her existence is tied to your father's offshore assets. That's why we need your help. You're the only one who can release those funds to secure her protection." Lena stepped back. Her hands trembled. She felt like she was being pulled into a whirlpool, faster and deeper than she could swim. Keanu's voice broke through gently. "Do you believe him?" She looked at him. For the first time, she saw doubt in his eyes, not toward her, but for the situation unraveling in front of him. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I thought I left all this behind. I thought I could just be someone new." Keanu nodded slowly. "Sometimes we don't get to leave everything. Sometimes it finds us, but that doesn't mean we have to let it define us." She stared at him. The words settled into her chest like an anchor, heavy but grounding. Dominic stepped aside and held out a small flash drive. "This has everything. Accounts, documents, files from your father's private archive. If you read nothing else, read the letter from Elena. She's waiting, and the people watching her won't wait much longer." He handed the drive to her, then walked away, disappearing into a black car that had waited silently at the edge of the street. For a long time, Lena didn't move. She stared at the flash drive in her palm like it might explode. Keanu sat down on a metal crate nearby and gestured gently for her to sit beside him. She did. The silence between them stretched long, but not uncomfortable. "You didn't seem surprised," Lena finally said. "When he called me Blackstone, when he said all that." Keanu looked out at the road ahead. "I've seen enough to know people carry more than what's on the surface. I figured there was something about you, but I also knew it didn't matter. Not if you're kind. Not if you try." She swallowed hard. "I was so afraid of becoming like them. I thought leaving would make me someone better." He turned to her. "Maybe it did. But maybe going back now, maybe it's your chance to change the story. Not for them. For her. Your sister." Those words hit harder than she expected. That night, Lena didn't go home. She asked Keanu if he knew a quiet place, somewhere she could think. He drove them both on his motorcycle down roads few tourists knew, to a small cabin in the hills. It was quiet, nestled between trees, the wind whispering through leaves. She spent hours reading the files. Her father's letter was short, full of guilt, maybe even remorse, but it was Elena's letter that made Lena weep. Her sister had grown up in isolation in Europe under a different name, unaware of her connection to Blackstone blood until recently. She had dreams, too, of helping girls like herself, of building safe spaces for children whose voices had been stolen. She wrote to Lena not with entitlement but with hope. "If you are out there," the letter read, "I want to meet the woman who had the courage to walk away." Lena closed the letter and looked at Keanu, who had been sitting nearby, never pushing, always present. "I have to find her," she said softly. He nodded. "Then let's find her." But neither of them knew what would happen next. Because across the ocean, someone else had read Elena's letter, and they had no interest in reunions, only in control. The moment Lena chose to go back, she stepped into something much bigger than family. And this time it wouldn't just be about inheritance or secrets. It would be about survival. Whispers across the sea. The plane cut through the night sky, its engines humming low like a secret being carried across continents. Lena sat by the window, her eyes wide open, though she hadn't slept in more than 30 hours. Sleep in a time like this felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Every breath she took now seemed to carry more weight. She had spent so long hiding from who she was that stepping into this new truth felt like walking barefoot across glass, deliberate, painful, and unavoidable. Beside her, Keanu sat with his head slightly tilted back, eyes closed but not truly asleep. There was something in the way he breathed, calm, measured, aware of everything. They had left Los Angeles within 2 days of reading the letter. Lena had made arrangements through contacts she never thought she'd use again. Money had a strange way of opening doors even when you didn't want it to. Private charters, encrypted calls, names whispered only in certain circles. This world, once so familiar, now felt alien, and yet there was no turning back. Their destination was a private estate outside Nice, France, perched on a cliff overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. According to the last trace from Dominic's files, Elena had been staying there under the protection of a woman named Madame Delacroix, an old friend of their father's, once a political ally, now a ghost in the diplomatic world. Her name didn't appear in public directories, only in black folders, behind locked government doors. If Elena had chosen her as a protector, it meant she was truly scared. The moment they landed, Lena felt the difference. Europe had a different kind of silence. It wasn't just about the air or the language. It was in the way people looked at you, the way walls seemed to hold secrets in their stones. Everything here felt older, heavier, like history watching from the shadows. Their driver said little as he drove them up the winding roads, cutting through forests and stone tunnels, past gates with no signs and cameras hidden in trees. When they arrived, the estate was quiet. Too quiet. A tall man in a black coat greeted them. He had sharp features and a voice like polished steel. "Welcome, Madame Delacroix is expecting you." They were led through high-ceilinged corridors, past paintings older than most countries. Gold trim, heavy curtains, floors that didn't creak despite being centuries old. But the most unsettling thing was the way the staff looked at Lena. Not with curiosity, but with caution. Like they were trained not to stare too long, like they knew who she was. Madame Delacroix sat in a sunroom facing the sea. She was in her late 60s, but held herself like a queen. Her silver hair was tied back neatly, and her eyes were so pale they looked almost colorless. She didn't rise when they entered. She simply lifted her gaze to Lena and studied her for a long moment. "You have his eyes," she said finally. Lena stood straighter. "I'm not here to talk about him." "No," the woman replied, folding her hands. "You're here for your sister." Keanu stepped slightly in front of Lena, his presence quiet but firm. "Is she safe?" "Safe is a complicated word," Madame Delacroix said, her voice smooth like aged wine. "She's alive. She's scared. And now that you're here, things may become even more dangerous." Lena took a step forward. "I need to see her now." Madame Delacroix held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. "Follow me." They walked through another set of halls, then down a spiral staircase that led to the west wing, a more modern section, likely built for privacy. The door at the end of the corridor was guarded. Two men with earpieces nodded when they saw Madame Delacroix. She keyed in a code and the door clicked open. Inside, the room was dim but warm. Bookshelves lined the walls. Soft music played from an old speaker. And there, sitting near the window, was Elena. She was younger than Lena expected, barely 19. Her hair was jet black, her features sharp, almost a mirror of their father's but softer around the eyes. Those eyes locked onto Lena's the moment the door opened. For a second, neither of them moved. It was as if the air itself held its breath. Then Elena stood. "You came," she said, voice barely a whisper. Lena walked forward slowly. "I didn't know you existed until a week ago." Elena gave a small smile. "I've always known about you." Those words hit like thunder. Lena stopped in front of her. "Why didn't you?" "I was told not to," Elena said. "Father said you'd hate me, that I was the reason your mother left. He said you walked away because of me." Lena blinked, stunned. "What? No, I didn't even know." "He lied about everything," Elena said. "He told me you were a monster, a spoiled, cruel heiress who abandoned her blood. But then I saw the news. That night in Los Angeles, someone filmed you helping children at a shelter. Someone recognized you. And I saw it. I saw who you really are." Keanu stood silently in the back, watching. There was something in his eyes that said he understood what reunions like this cost. Lena reached out slowly. "We were both lied to, but that ends now." Elena stepped forward, and for the first time they embraced. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't neat, but it was real. Madame Delacroix gave them space, but her expression was tense. "We don't have much time," she said quietly. "They know you're here." Keanu stepped closer. "Who's they?" Madame Delacroix lowered her voice. "Private syndicates. Old enemies of your father. Some of them think Elena holds the access keys to the Blackstone digital vaults. When they find out she doesn't, they'll come for Lena instead." Lena's jaw tightened. "Then we leave." "You can't," the older woman said. "Not yet. There's something you need to see." She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder, one marked with an emblem Lena hadn't seen since childhood. The Blackstone crest. Inside were photos, maps, and something else. A note. Handwritten. Recent. Elena gasped. That wasn't there yesterday. Keanu leaned over the table and studied it. The handwriting was neat, familiar, but the message was short. "I'm watching. Leave and she dies." The air shifted. Tension folded into the room like storm clouds, building over the sea. Keanu reached for his phone, but there was no signal. Madame Delacroix's face had gone pale. "We're already surrounded," she whispered. Lena's hands clenched. Her voice was steady but laced with steel. "Then we fight. But we do it smart. And we do it together." And as the lights flickered for just a second, the storm outside broke into thunder. But it wasn't nature. It was the beginning of something much darker. The fire in the halls, the first crack in the silence, came with a flicker. Just a blink, barely noticeable. A soft shift in the power grid. Lights dipped and returned. Nothing more than a hiccup to the average person. But Keanu noticed. He had seen this kind of flicker before. It didn't belong to nature, and it wasn't accidental. It was the kind of flicker that preceded something calculated, something deliberate. He stood up from the reading chair in the corner, his jaw tightening, his body still but alert, like a wire pulled too tight. Lena turned toward him, eyes filled with unspoken questions. Before he could answer, the lights flickered again, longer this time. And when they returned, the air in the room had changed. It was heavier, not because of heat, but because of presence. Keanu moved fast, walking to the hallway door and pressing his ear against the thick wood. No sound. Too quiet. He pulled it open slowly. The hallway, once alive with warm light, now sat dim, shadows, reaching like fingers from every corner. The guards who had been stationed outside the West Wing were gone. Not unconscious, not dead, simply gone. "We need to move," Keanu said, his voice firm but low. "They're here." Madame Delacroix stepped into the hallway behind him, pistol in hand. Steady grip, no hesitation. "I warned you. They move in silence, with masks and gloves. But they always leave one thing behind. Emptiness. The silence is their signature." Lena grabbed Elena's hand and held it tightly. "What do they want?" "They want you," Madame Delacroix said. "But not just your name. They want the access codes to the Blackstone vaults, and they think you already used them." "But I didn't," Lena whispered. "I didn't even open the secure drive yet. I didn't—" "It doesn't matter," Delacroix said. "They believe what they're paid to believe, and someone paid them a fortune." Keanu had already moved down the hallway, checking each room. He returned a moment later with a flash of urgency in his eyes. "The north exit's been sealed. They've cut the power from the control room. Emergency lighting is running, but we have less than 20 minutes before full lockdown. Once that happens, we're boxed in." "How many of them?" Lena asked. Keanu paused. "At least 6 inside, more waiting around the perimeter." Elena's breath grew shallow. "We can't outrun them, can we?" Keanu looked at her, then at Lena. "Not without help. Not unless we turn the game around." Madame Delacroix nodded. "Follow me." She led them down a hidden corridor behind the bookcase, one of the estate's oldest secrets. Carved into the stone generations ago, the passage snaked beneath the western foundation, lit only by flickering oil lamps. Their footsteps echoed faintly as they moved, the air cold and damp. It wasn't comfort that guided them now. It was survival. Halfway through, Lena stopped suddenly. We can't just run. If we run now, they'll chase us. We need to distract them. Stall them. Keanu turned to her, surprised. You have something in mind? She reached into her coat and pulled out the flash drive. This is what they want. But they don't know what's actually on it. And we can use that. Madame Delacroix narrowed her eyes. It's dangerous to bluff with wolves. I'm not bluffing, Lena said. I'm giving them something to chase while we slip away. Elena looked terrified. What if they catch you instead? Lena turned to her sister, pressing the flash drive into her palm. If they catch me, you run. You use this. You build something better with it. Not a throne, not an empire, something real, something good. Elena's lip trembled. But I don't know how. You will, Lena whispered. I didn't either until someone helped me. The memory of the highway rushed back, wet asphalt, blinking hazard lights, a man with calm eyes and a toolkit, a man who had stopped for no reason other than kindness. She looked at Keanu. Will you go with her? His response was simple. No hesitation. Yes. Madame Delacroix touched Lena's arm. There's another way out, but only one person can take it at a time. You'll need to create enough noise to draw them to you. I can do noise, Lena said, and she did. They split up. Lena returned up the old staircase that led to the Great Hall, while Keanu, Elena, and Delacroix disappeared into the underground tunnel system that would lead them to the forest. She walked with steady steps, the walls growing darker with every floor she ascended. Her heart pounded, but she embraced the fear. It made her sharper. When she reached the upper landing, she opened a glass cabinet and pulled out the old Blackstone ceremonial sword. It wasn't sharp, but it gleamed and it made noise when it hit the marble floor. She banged it 3 times. Loud, echoing crashes. Then she waited. Footsteps approached. Quick, trained, deliberate. 4 masked figures entered the hall, their weapons drawn. They stopped when they saw her, standing alone in the center of the room, holding the sword like a challenge. You're making a mistake, one of them said through a modulated voice. Give us the drive. It's already gone, Lena said, and even if I had it, I'd burn it before giving it to you. They moved in formation, surrounding her slowly. Lena smiled. You really should have known, she said. Blackstones don't kneel. And with that, she hurled the ceremonial sword into the far chandelier. Sparks burst. The glass shattered. One of the guards ducked, another cursed. She sprinted across the hall, drawing them away from the main corridor, through a winding series of rooms she knew better than they did. They chased her just as planned. But time was running out. She could hear more footsteps behind them. Reinforcements. They were moving faster now, more aggressive. She ducked through a servant's stairwell, heart pounding, lungs burning. She wasn't going to win this by fighting. She had to stall just long enough. In the woods outside the estate, Keanu and Elena emerged into the cold wind. Madame Delacroix whispered into her comms device, giving coded signals to someone on the other end. An old ally, maybe. Helicopters were minutes away, but back inside, Lena stumbled into the old wine cellar. No exits, no windows. They caught up. The masked leader stepped forward. Game over. Lena smiled through bloody lips. That's what your boss said to my father once. And where is he now? She looked him dead in the eye. Dead, but not forgotten. The moment he raised his weapon, the entire estate shook with the roar of chopper blades. Outside, floodlights hit the trees. Masked men scattered. Keanu stood between Elena and a tree, shielding her as elite security forces rappelled from the sky. The doors of the wine cellar burst open. Light. Gunfire. Then, everything went dark. Legacy reborn in silence. Lena opened her eyes to white light. For A second, she didn't know if it was morning or heaven. The ceiling above her was sterile, flat, too clean to belong to the estate. Her body was heavy, wrapped in sheets and wires. There was a dull pain in her ribs and her arm was bandaged, the skin tight with bruising beneath. A soft beeping sounded from a monitor beside her. She turned her head slowly and saw Keanu sitting near the window, still wearing the same clothes from that night. His face was marked with exhaustion, but his eyes lit up the second he saw her awake. "You made it?" he said, the words calm, almost a whisper. "Did I?" Lena's voice cracked like old wood. "Feels like I got hit by a train." Keanu chuckled, the sound breaking through the tension in the room. "Close enough. You were unconscious when they found you. Concussion, fractured rib. Lucky you didn't bleed out." She closed her eyes again, then opened them slowly. "Elena?" He nodded. "Safe. With Madame Delacroix. The extraction worked. The mercenaries disappeared once the helicopter team swept the forest. No sign of who paid them yet. But they were professionals, well-trained, anonymous, not just criminals, people who knew your family's darkest ties." Lena sighed, the sound filled with old weight. "I should have burned the money, buried it where no one could find it." "You still can," Keanu said. "Or you can use it the way you planned." She stared at the ceiling, the memory of her sister's frightened eyes, the soft hug in the book-lined room, the crackling letter that felt like a second chance. "She deserves better." "You both do," he said. For a long moment, the hospital room fell into silence, not heavy or hollow, but something in between. Lena reached for the table beside her and picked up the remote. She turned the small TV on. It was muted, but the headlines flashed across the screen in bold letters. "Mysterious attack on private estate in France. Sparks global attention. Heiress missing. Later found alive. Blackstone name resurfaces. Hidden daughter rumored to be involved in humanitarian mission. Anonymous footage shows woman shielding security guards from attackers with her own body." Lena turned it off. "I didn't do it to be seen," she said. Keanu smiled. "Doesn't matter. You were." They discharged her 2 days later under heavy security. News cameras lined the gates of the hospital, but they never saw her. She was smuggled out through a back corridor, into a car driven by Delacroix's people. Her sister was waiting at the estate's secondary villa, one less known to the public, nestled near the Italian border. When Lena stepped inside, Elena ran to her and hugged her so tightly she nearly reopened the stitches on her shoulder. "You could have died," Elena whispered. "So could you," Lena replied, brushing her sister's hair back. "But we didn't. And that has to mean something." For the next week, they didn't speak of vaults or legacies or the Blackstone name. They cooked simple meals, took walks under tall trees, and slowly began to learn each other, not as heirs or chess pieces, but as sisters. Elena told her stories of her childhood, quiet, sheltered, lonely, and Lena told her the truth about theirs, the cold father, the trapped mother, the silence that filled every room of their mansion. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and when the sun finally rose over their final morning at the villa, Lena stood on the balcony with Keanu beside her, both of them watching the golden horizon crack open. "I made a decision," she said, voice calm but unshakable. Keanu turned to her, waiting. "I'm giving it away. Not all of it. Just most. The Blackstone vaults, the offshore accounts, the properties. Everything we don't need. I'm starting the Romanova Foundation, under Elena's name." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Romanova?" "It's hers," Lena said. "Not his. I want the world to remember her, not as someone born into the shadows, but as someone who brought light, shelters, art schools, refugee homes, everything we wished we had growing up." Keanu smiled. "You're building the world you wanted to live in. I'm just giving back the pieces that were never mine to begin with." And she meant it. In the months that followed, headlines around the world changed. The name Blackstone faded, replaced by something softer, newer, more human. The Romanova Foundation launched initiatives in 5 countries. Lena and Elena appeared in interviews not as socialites but as women with stories, stories of silence, survival, and choosing kindness over control. As for Keanu, he didn't stay in the spotlight. He never did. He quietly helped behind the scenes, connecting people, donating quietly, lending his presence only when needed. He never asked for credit, never accepted payment. When asked why he stayed involved, his answer was always the same: because sometimes the smallest kindness saves the biggest lives. The last scene of their journey came not with a spotlight, but with a single moment. They stood together, 1 year later, on the same highway where it had all begun, the same bend in the road, the same fading paint lines. A new silver sedan sat parked to the side, not broken this time, but waiting. Keanu leaned against his motorcycle. Lena stood beside him, her hands in the pockets of her worn coat. "Funny how it started here," she said softly. "Not funny," he replied. "Just meant to be." She looked out at the ocean. "You know, I never got to say it properly." He glanced at her, curious. "Say what?" "Thank you." Keanu smiled, then looked at the clouds as they drifted by. "You already did," he said. A moment passed, and then Lena turned to him, eyes shining, wind brushing her hair back. "Then let me say it again. Not for the tire, not even for helping me with the foundation, but for seeing me when I didn't know who I was." His expression softened. "We're all just people, Lena. The trick is remembering that, especially when the world tries to turn you into something else." She nodded, the wind tugging at the corners of her coat. As they stood there side by side, two souls brought together not by fate but by choice, something became clear. Not all wealth is measured in gold. Not all legacies are forged in boardrooms or bank vaults. Sometimes the most powerful legacy is the one born from humility, resilience, and the simple act of stopping for someone on the side of the road. And for Lena Blackstone Romanova, her story would never again be about what she ran from. It would be about what she built, with her sister, with her truth, and with the man who reminded her that kindness, even in silence, can echo louder than any name.